Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. An absolutely unput-downable book. It's called Still Standing, From Debutante to Detox. Let's go right back to when you were a girl. The pictures in here are of a young girl from a well-off Auckland family. The whole debutante thing is going on. But for you, it was a different story altogether. Behind the pictures, there's something else going on. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the bulimia and the anorexia. That was really the first problem. How old were you when that started?
It was my last term at school, Alan. I was probably 17, 18 years. And I mean, I was suffering from puppy fat, and basically I wanted to lose weight before I left, after I left school. And it just, I thought, it just went on. I didn't realise, most people didn't know what anorexia was in those days.
So you must have been one of the first people to really identify it as that.
Yes, and I had a wonderful doctor, and I think he identified it, but nobody really knew what was going on, and it was so bewildering.
Well, you describe at one point, you say you found where your mother hid the scales, and you enjoyed watching every time you got on it going down and down and down and down.
That's right, because an anorexics get a distorted view of their body. To other people, they obviously have got bones sticking up, but the anorexic, no, they get a very distorted body image. But bulimia came in because what happened then, I found that I could quieten people by eating, but then I would regurgitate what I ate. And I mean, it's not easy to talk about this now, but it's the only way that people are going to come to understand. And that's basically what the book is there for, is for people to understand that you can recover from these things. But there's a whole way in which the mind works for the bulimic and the alcoholic, which is very confusing for people to try and understand.
Because I think if you're not in that, if you're not there, you just don't know what's going on. You just can't understand it.
Well, no, Anna, because it's like most experiences, until you've actually been there, it's very difficult to understand.
Where did alcohol come in? When did that start?
Alcohol really came in, I suppose, when I found out what it could do for me, or to me, probably no, for me, was really when I was in Spain, and I was looking after children there, and I met an English girlfriend, and she introduced me to sangria, which is half wine, half lemonade, and in the end, to cut a long story short, I threw out the lemonade and was left with the wine, and it took me out of reality, and that's really what I needed, because for me, even as a child, I felt very lost, very lonely, lacked self-confidence. I mean, that's not what the cover portrayed, but actually underneath, and alcohol changed all that because it anaesthetised it all.
You can see a link, can't you, between the self-image problems of the anorexia and then going on to the alcoholism.
Absolutely, yes. And then, of course, it was really quite catastrophic, the fact that, all three of those were then combined. And I mean, I'm really lucky I came out of it, because all three of them are killer illnesses, and they are illnesses, yes.
You talk about blackout, and at one point you talk about you came in with your mother, and as you went past her, there was the clink of the bottles in your capacious handbag, I think you described it as. That must have been a terrifying time for your parents, who just didn't know where to go, what to do.
No, and what was so awful for Mother was that she said to me later, she said, the look of sheer and utter hatred in your eyes when I took that bottle off you. She said, and here were you, my oldest daughter, that I'd been so proud of when you were at school, etc. And she said it absolutely tore my heart out. Yeah. And, I do get quite emotional about this because of the hurt that I caused other people. Yeah. It was not intentional. And I've made the amends wherever I can now. I had to, but a lot of people said to me, Liz, we realised you were sick. It's great to see you well and to see what you're able to do with what had happened to you.
There's a point in here which actually would reduce anyone to tears, and that's where you write to your mother. And you just said you were sorry for everything that had happened and what you'd put her through. And you say that you found the letter afterwards, and it was tear-stained.
Yes, she always read her mail over a cup of tea, and those were not tea stains that were on that letter. And I hardly ever saw my mother cry. I can't remember when I saw my mother cry. Yeah.
Let's skip forward a bit. I mean, you went through all sorts of things to try to find a solution. including a psychiatric hospital, a nunnery. I mean, the psychiatric hospital must have been terrifying. The nunnery can be quite terrifying, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But the psychiatric hospital, I mean, there were all sorts of... Lobotomy was talked about, electroconvulsive treatment. I mean, that
was in the 60s when they were still doing this. I don't know whether they were doing the lobotomies at Oakley, I don't think so, but I certainly know that there were areas in the country where they were doing that. And I mean, that is really interfering with the brain. You go in and try and change the wiring system, which is quite terrifying. There's been recent things in various periodicals today as to what that does to an individual. And the ECT, electric current treatment, is when they put these, they're like headphones, and people who've had that have found that some of them have lost the memory of, for example, how to play the piano. And I was terrified of that. Fortunately, I went into the hospital on a voluntary basis. If I had actually gone in, if somebody had actually put me in not on a voluntary basis, committed me, then I would have had no choice as to whether I had that or not. And it really was pretty scary. I mean, I had to keep my wits about me to survive in that place. I mean, the average person would go in there once. I went in there twice. I mean, you know, this is alcoholism. This is alcoholism. And then, of course, I mean, I decided I was going to get out of the country, away from everybody and everything, so I took off to England. And then, you know, again, through a series of circumstances, ended up in a nunnery. That was an experience.
There was one nun you took out. She said she was a very straight-talking Yorkshire nun. I can imagine that
she was.
She didn't take any nonsense.
Absolutely no nonsense at all. No, no.
Did that experience help you, do you think, on your road through?
It did. It did. I mean, I was very fortunate that I ended up in that environment. But, of course, finally what did help me was no psychiatrist or doctor, and they never get us well anyway. They always write the prescription and make the suggestions. If you don't take the prescription or do what they suggest you do, then nothing's going to change. But what happened, and what was the real turnaround for me, was this woman I met who actually said to me, I'm a recovered alcoholic, Liz, and I want you to listen to my story, because everybody had wanted to tell me what to do. This woman said, I want you to listen to me. And what I discovered was that she had been where I was. And what she was basically saying, if you want to be like me, then you need to do what I did. And if you don't want to do that, well, that's fine. Find somebody else to help you. So she was absolutely upfront. She knew exactly how to handle me. She was a step ahead in all my justifications and rationalizations. And I was cornered. But to begin with, I didn't really want to do anything because I hadn't got bad enough. I mean, how bad does one have to get? And this is why I'm prepared to be open about it. I mean, I don't go out there and bang tambourines, and I certainly have nothing against alcohol. You know, I'll pour it, I'll bath in it, but just don't ask me to drink it. Because for me, there's a whole reaction that then starts. And if it was only alcohol that was the problem, then we wouldn't need treatment centres, we wouldn't need things like Alcoholics Anonymous, we wouldn't need outpatient programs. No. The alcohol actually puts petrol on the fire for the alcoholic, so that's where the disease is, yeah.
There's so much to talk about. We've run out of time, which I knew would happen, but thank you so much. It's a privilege to meet you and a privilege to read the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.